What if the man who never smiled turned out to be the one who could break your heart and heal it in the very same breath? Stay with me till the end. You won't believe how this story unfolds. And while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable journeys just like this one. I used to believe there was nothing more sacred than family. That belief shattered the day my father sold me. I can still hear the sound of the pen scratching across paper, the weight of it heavier than any vow I had ever imagined taking. It was supposed to be a simple signature, just ink on a page. But that contract, it stole everything I thought I owned, my future, my freedom, my name. My father never looked me in the eye when he signed it. We sat in the tiny back room of our family's tailor shop, the scent of steamed fabric and cedarwood heavy in the air. That smell had cradled my childhood. Late nights watching my father stitch wedding gowns by hand while my mother hummed lullabies in the kitchen. But tonight, that smell felt like the slow suffocation of a life I was about to lose. Vincent Reed stood across the table, tall and terrifying in his tailored black suit. The dim light of the shop flickered against his sharp jawline and hollow, unsmiling mouth. They called him the man who never smiled, and in that moment, I understood why. His presence felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, beautiful, commanding, and merciless. "You'll have security for the rest of your life," Vincent's lawyer had said, sliding the contract toward my father. "Your debts cleared. Your shop saved." My father's hands had trembled when he picked up the pen. "I'm sorry, Anna," he whispered, though the words felt brittle, meaningless. "I have no choice." I wanted to scream that there was always a choice. But I kept my mouth shut. I always did. Later that night, after the ink had dried and Vincent had left without so much as glancing at me, I found the letter. It was tucked between the pages of my mother's old cookbook. The one she used to pull down on Sunday mornings when she made her special cinnamon rolls. The envelope was brittle, yellowed with age, sealed with a wax stamp I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I broke it open. "Dearest Mary, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for leaving things this way. I never meant for you to carry this burden alone. You saved my son's life, and I failed you in return. I pray you'll understand one day. Tell Anna I'm proud of her. And tell Vincent I'm sorry. G. Reed." My breath hitched. Reed. I read the letter again, slower this time, each word clawing deeper into me. My mother had worked for the Reed family. She had saved Vincent's life. Why had she never told me? Why had she carried the secret to her grave? I pressed the paper to my chest, closing my eyes against the burn in my throat. All these years, I had believed my father's debt was the reason Vincent wanted me. But this letter whispered of something older, something unfinished. And still, I said nothing. 2 weeks later, I stood in the grand hall of Vincent Reed's estate in Boston, wearing a dress I hadn't chosen, in front of people I didn't. No, marrying a man who couldn't even pretend to care. The air smelled of sandalwood and something sharper. Whiskey, maybe. Dozens of flickering candles lined the marble staircase, their light bending through the crystal chandelier above us. The silence was deafening. No music, no family, no friends. Just the hollow echo of my heels against the polished floor as I walked toward a future that wasn't mine. Vincent stood at the altar like a statue, his gray eyes fixed on some invisible point far beyond me. He never looked down, never met my gaze. It was as if I didn't exist. I stood before him, clutching the hem of my silk dress to keep my hands from shaking. The minister's voice was a dull hum in my ears, reciting vows that felt more like prison, bars than promises. "Do you, Vincent Reed, take Anna Collins to be your lawfully wedded wife?" For a heartbeat, I dared to hope he'd say no, that he'd refuse, that he'd set me free. But when he spoke, his voice was colder than glass. I do. My throat closed. I could barely breathe. Do you, Anna Collins, take Vincent Reed to be your lawfully wedded husband? My lips parted, but the words felt like ash on my tongue. I do. The ring was cool against my skin, slipped onto my finger by hands that felt like stone. He didn't squeeze my hand, didn't offer a glance. He turned before the minister could finish pronouncing us husband and wife, already walking away. And just like that, it was done. I stayed frozen in place for a long time after the room had emptied, after the candles had flickered out. I ran my fingers over the edge of my mother's letter, hidden safely in the pocket of my dress. What had she meant when she wrote, "Tell Vincent"? I'm sorry. I had no answers. Only a marriage born of silence and debt. And the growing ache of knowing I had become nothing more than a name on a contract. I lifted my chin, swallowed my fear, and told myself the same lie I had whispered every night since the deal was struck. I'll survive this. I have to. The penthouse was nothing like I had imagined. It was colder, quieter, like a museum no one dared to live in. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Boston skyline, 1,000 lights blinking like distant stars. The city felt miles away, untouchable. A glass fortress high above the noise of the real world. But no matter how far up we were, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was suffocating. Vincent didn't speak on the ride here. He didn't speak when he unlocked the door. And he certainly didn't speak as he pointed down a dim hallway to the guest wing of the penthouse, second door on the left. He said flatly, "No welcome home. No good night. Just that." I stood there clutching the skirt of my dress, waiting for something, anything, that might feel human. But Vincent turned his back and disappeared into his study, leaving me alone in a space that didn't belong to either of us. I wandered to the guest room, my heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. The room was beautiful, I supposed. Minimalist. Perfect. A king-sized bed, untouched white linens, a sleek dresser that looked like it had never held a single belonging. I peeled off the dress that felt more like a shroud than silk and slipped into an old sweater I had stuffed into my small suitcase. I should have stayed there. I should have closed the door, pulled the covers over my head, and forgotten the world outside. But the loneliness gnawed at me. So I did the only thing I knew how to do when the silence became too loud. I went to the kitchen to make tea. The cabinets were stocked with glassware and polished dishes, all perfectly arranged, untouched. But hidden on the highest shelf, pushed to the back, I found a worn ceramic teapot, cracked along the handle, slightly chipped at the base. I ran my fingers over the rough edges, a lump rising in my throat. My mother used to have one just like it, the same off-white glaze, the same tiny imperfection near the spout. She would hum while it steeped, folding laundry or brushing flour off her hands. I could almost hear her now, that soft tune floating through the kitchen of our tiny home back in Maine. I closed my eyes, clutching the teapot to my chest. I miss you, Mom. I don't know how to do this without you. I filled the pot with water, turned on the kettle, and waited for the hiss of steam to break the quiet. The scent of chamomile slowly filled the air, soft and familiar, like an anchor in a world that no longer felt real. I poured a cup and stood by the window, staring out at the endless city lights. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sitting, alone in the shop, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I wondered if he felt relief or regret. The floor creaked softly behind me. I turned, startled. Vincent stood in the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. He leaned against the frame, his arms crossed over his chest, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His tie was gone, the first 2 buttons of his shirt undone. His face, though still unreadable, seemed less like stone and more like shadow, like something breaking beneath the surface. "You drink tea before bed?" he asked, voice low and rough. I clutched the cup tighter, unsure how to answer. He'd barely acknowledged me for days. "Why now?" "Yes," I managed softly. "My mom used to make it when I couldn't sleep." He nodded once, stepping into the room. I tensed, bracing for whatever came next, but he didn't move any closer. Instead, his eyes drifted to the old teapot on the counter. "That belonged to my mother," he murmured, almost to himself. I blinked, surprised. I thought it looked like one my mom had," I whispered, my throat tightening. His gaze snapped to mine, sharp and searching, as if he were trying to piece something together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us stretched thin, fragile. "You look like her," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. "My mother?" He nodded again, slower this time. "I remember her. She worked for my family, years ago." The room tilted, the floor slipping out from under me. You knew her?" I choked out. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. "She saved my life once. When I was 8, I fell into the river behind the estate. She pulled me out." My chest ached. I thought of the letter, of the apology she had written to him, to his father. Why had she never told me? "Why didn't you say anything?" I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. He looked away, as if the weight of the memory was too much to bear. "I didn't want this to be about pity or guilt." His voice cracked, just barely. "I thought if I could repay the debt, I could let it go. Repay the debt. Was that all I was? A payment for a life saved long ago?" I felt the familiar burn of betrayal rising in my chest, but it tangled with something else. Something I couldn't name. He had known my mother. He had remembered her. And somehow, that made the silence between us feel heavier than before. I turned back to the window, clutching the teacup to my chest like a shield. My reflection stared back at me, pale and lost. A stranger in a stranger's home. "I'm going to bed," I whispered, unable to bear the weight of his gaze any longer. I didn't wait for his response. I walked down the hall, closing the guest room door softly behind me, my heart pounding in my ears. But even as I lay down, the letter hidden beneath my pillow, I couldn't shake the sound of his voice. "You look like her." I didn't know what scared me more, what that meant for him, or what it might mean for me. The sun rose the next morning, but the weight in my chest didn't lift with it. I stayed in bed long after the light had filled the room, clutching the letter I'd tucked beneath my pillow. The words blurred as I read them again and again, as if somewhere between the lines I might find an explanation that made any of this feel less cruel. "Tell Vincent, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. What had my mother done that required an apology? Why had she never spoken his name? Not once in all the years I had sat at her feet, watching her stitch dresses and men's shirts. Why keep that part of her life hidden?" The sound of footsteps outside my door pulled me back to the present. I shoved the letter into the drawer of the nightstand and pressed my palms to my face, trying to steady the storm brewing inside me. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to get them. I found Vincent in the study, standing by the window with his back to me. His suit jacket was gone again, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the morning light cutting a sharp line across his jaw. For a moment, I thought about turning around, slipping back into my room and pretending I didn't care, pretending that this wasn't eating me alive. But I was done pretending. "Why didn't you tell me you knew my mother?" He didn't turn, didn't even flinch. I stepped further into the room, my voice trembling. You stood there, in that church, letting me believe I was just part of some deal. You let my father sign me away without a word. And you knew. You knew her. He exhaled slowly, the sound barely more than a whisper. It wouldn't have changed anything. My throat tightened. Wouldn't it? Finally he turned. His face was as unreadable as ever, but his eyes, there was something different in them. Something heavier. Something human. I remember the day she saved me, he said, his voice low. I was a stupid kid. I wandered too close to the riverbank, slipped. The current was strong. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. He paused, swallowing hard. And then she was there, pulling me out, holding me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. My breath hitched. She sat with me by the fire that night, he continued, his voice softening. She didn't say much, just held my hand. I never forgot her face. I pressed a hand to my chest, willing my heart to slow. She wrote you a letter, I whispered. Before she died. His brow furrowed. I never got it, I nodded slowly. She hid it. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she didn't want you to carry the weight of whatever happened between our families. He leaned against the desk, rubbing a hand over his face. For the first time, he looked tired. Not the polished, controlled man the world saw, but a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. I tried to forget, he said quietly, but when I saw you that day in your father's shop, I couldn't. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. So you bought me instead. His jaw tensed. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then what was it supposed to be, Vincent? I snapped, my voice cracking. Was this your way of settling some invisible debt? Marry the daughter of the woman who saved you. Keep the tailor shop afloat. And call it even? He looked up, his eyes dark and unreadable. Would it have been easier if I'd left you to lose everything? I flinched as if he'd struck me. Tears blurred my vision as I turned away, clutching the edge of the bookshelf to keep from collapsing under the weight of it all. I hate you, I whispered, but the words felt hollow the moment they left my lips. I didn't hate him. I hated how much I wanted to understand him. I hated how much my heart ached to believe there was more to this than a contract. I heard him move behind me, the quiet rustle of his footsteps growing closer. I braced myself, waiting for him to lash out, to throw more cold truths at me. But instead, his voice came soft, almost broken. I never wanted to see you like this. I squeezed my eyes shut, swallowing the sob that threatened to break free. You should have let me go, I whispered. Silence stretched between us, heavy and raw. I felt him step closer, his presence a wall of heat behind me. I couldn't, he admitted, the words barely more than a breath. Not after seeing you again. Not after remembering her. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. His face was inches from mine, the mask of indifference cracked wide open. I saw it all, the guilt, the anger, the fear. Why me, Vincent? I whispered. Why not just pay the debt and walk away? His throat worked as he struggled to find the words. And when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I almost missed it. Because you reminded me of her. And because I didn't want to forget. I felt my knees weaken, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to hate him. But standing there, looking into the eyes of the man who had haunted every corner of my mind since the day he took my name, I couldn't. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the betrayal and the pain, I saw the boy who had been saved once. And maybe, just maybe, he was trying to save me now. I tried to avoid him after that. I tried to build walls higher than the guilt and sharper than the words we'd exchanged. But every time I caught my breath, every time I thought I'd found distance again, he was there. I avoided meals in the dining room. I took my tea later, after I knew the lights in his study had gone dark. I even started walking circles around the penthouse when I couldn't sleep, just to keep the silence from caving in on me. But the silence always knew how to find me. That night, I thought I was alone again. I stood by the window in the guest room, watching rain streak across the glass. Boston's skyline blurred in the mist, the city breathing without me, like it always had. I pressed my palm against the cool pane, remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere, anywhere, that didn't feel like a cage. Behind me, the door creaked open. I froze, breath catching in my throat. Not again. Not tonight. Anna. His voice was lower than usual, as if he'd swallowed every sharp edge. He didn't sound like the Vincent who had signed my life away. He sounded like a man who wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak my name out loud. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I told you I didn't want this, I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. So why won't you let me go? His footsteps moved closer, slow and measured, stopping just behind me. I felt his presence before I heard, his breath, warm and steady, ghosting across the back of my neck. I tried. He said softly, "God, Anna." I tried. I bit down on my lip, willing the tears not to come. You can stop pretending this is anything more than duty. He let out a breath, something between a laugh and a curse. Duty doesn't keep me awake at night. I swallowed hard, my hands curling into fists at my sides. His next words landed like a stone in my chest. You do. My knees weakened, and before I could move, he reached out, slowly, as if giving me time to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. His hand slid around my waist, fingers trembling slightly as they splayed over my stomach, pulling me back against him. I felt the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his breath against my temple. You think I don't see you? He whispered. You think I don't hear you moving through this place like you're already a ghost? I shut my eyes, fighting, the shiver that raced down my spine. You told me I was part of a contract, I choked out. That's all I've ever been to you. His grip tightened. Not hard, not forceful, but enough to keep me from slipping away. You were. Once. Swallowed hard, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. Then let me go. No. That single word cracked something open inside me. No? I whispered, breath hitching. Why? His forehead pressed against the back of my head, his voice breaking like glass. Because somewhere between the contract and tonight, I forgot how to let you go. My heart pounded so loud I thought he could hear it. I turned slowly, forcing myself to face him. His expression was raw, unguarded in a way I had never seen before. The cold, untouchable man I'd married was gone, and in his place stood a man unraveling before my eyes. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us, maybe it was neither. All I know is that one moment we were standing apart, and the next I was in his arms, his mouth on mine. It wasn't like I had imagined it would be. Forceful, angry, claiming. No. It was worse. It was slow. Careful. Like he was terrified I'd vanish if he moved too fast. His lips hovered over mine, breathing me in before pressing down with a tenderness that stole the air from my lungs. I melted into him, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, clutching him like a lifeline. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice cracking. I should have. God, I should have. But the words never came. I slid my hands to his face, cupping his jaw as I shook my head. "Don't," I breathed. "Please, don't." Something inside him shattered. He kissed me again, deeper this time, his hands trembling as they mapped every inch of my skin, as if he was learning me by memory, like he never wanted to forget what it felt like to hold something real. I let him. I let him take every piece of me I had tried so hard to protect. And when the night stretched into something softer, slower, when I lay tangled in the sheets with my head on his chest, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't broken anymore. Had let him claim me. And somewhere in the wreckage of us, I had claimed him, too. The next morning felt like waking from a dream I wasn't ready to leave behind. I lay still in the soft gray light, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Beside me, Vincent hadn't moved since he'd fallen asleep. His arm was still draped across my waist, his hand resting against my ribs, like he was afraid I'd slip away if he let go. I turned my head, studying the lines of his face, the faint crease. Between his brows, the softness in his mouth I had never noticed before. He looked human, vulnerable even, and that terrified me. Because if this wasn't real, if I had imagined the man who had held me so gently last night, I wasn't sure I could survive waking up alone again. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, careful not to disturb him. Wrapping myself in the nearest sweater, I padded barefoot through the hallway toward the kitchen. I needed space, air, something to anchor me to the ground. I boiled water for tea, trying to shake the memory of his hands on my skin, his breath in my ear, the way he had whispered my name like it meant something. I didn't hear him come in. Couldn't sleep? Vincent's voice was lower than usual, hoarse with sleep. I startled, nearly dropping the mug in my hand. He stood in the doorway, shirt rumpled, hair slightly tousled. Real, tangible. Here. I swallowed hard. Just needed some air. He nodded, stepping into the room. I watched him move, every step careful, like he was afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing had settled between us overnight. We stood in silence, the weight of the morning pressing down on us both. I couldn't take it anymore. "I don't know what this means," I whispered. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. "It means I can't keep pretending you don't matter." My breath hitched. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a frustrated sigh. "I've spent years building walls so high I forgot what it felt like to let anyone in. But last night, you tore them down without even trying." I bit my lip, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "Then why do I still feel like I'm waiting for you to push me away again?" He flinched, as if the words had cut deeper than I intended. "I'm not going to," he said quietly. "Not anymore." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I needed proof. Something real. Not just words whispered in the dark. I set my mug down on the counter, turning to face him fully. "Why me, Vincent?" I asked, voice trembling. "Why save the shop? Why all of this?" He swallowed hard, looking away like the weight of the answer might break him. "Because you deserved more than to lose everything," he whispered. "And because I couldn't stand the thought of you hating me for something I could have stopped." I opened my mouth to respond, but the buzz of his phone on the counter cut through the moment. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated before handing me the phone. An email was open, details of a corporate acquisition. The buyer? Langston Holdings. Victor Langston. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's the deal you've been working on, isn't it? He nodded, jaw clenched. And you're pulling out? Another nod. Why? I breathed. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand. Because taking that deal would mean dragging you into that world. The press, the spotlight, the whispers. You'd be nothing more than a pawn in their game. I won't do that to you. Tears welled in my eyes. But that deal, it's worth millions. His grip tightened, eyes dark and steady. None of it matters if it costs me you. The words stole the breath from my lungs. He cupped my face gently, brushing a tear from my cheek. I've already paid the price for keeping you. I just didn't realize until now. You were worth every damn penny. Later that afternoon, I sat in the living room, staring out at the city, while Vincent made a phone call in the other room. I didn't know what to do with the quiet between us. For the first time, it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like possibility. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I padded toward the door, heart pounding when I saw who stood on the other side. Dad? My father stood there, hat in hand, looking smaller than I remembered. May I come in? He asked softly. I nodded, stepping aside. He glanced around the penthouse, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. And then he did something I never expected. He dropped to his knees. Anna. I'm so sorry, he choked out. I thought I was saving you. I thought I was giving you a chance at something better. But all I did was sell you into a life I had no right to choose for you. I knelt beside him, tears streaming down my face. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he whispered, but I needed you to hear me say it. Before I could speak, Vincent appeared in the doorway, watching us silently. He crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside us. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to my father. My father opened it with shaking hands, eyes widening as he read the document inside. The deed to the shop, he whispered. Vincent nodded. It's yours. No conditions, no contracts. My father's voice broke. Why? Vincent's eyes met mine, soft and steady. Because she deserves the freedom to choose. I'd spent years learning to read silence. Growing up in a house where grief spoke louder than words after my mother died, I had become fluent in every unspoken thing. A glance, a sigh. The way someone's shoulders tightened when they carried too much but said nothing at all. That was why I knew. When Vincent handed my father that deed, when he stood quietly by while my father wept on the floor of our home, he had given more than paper. He had given permission. Permission for me to leave. I waited for the guilt to press down on me like it always did. But it never came. Because somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, the house was unnervingly still. I stood by the window in the kitchen, staring at the skyline I had once resented. It didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. My hands moved on instinct, pulling down the old ceramic teapot, the one that had become my anchor in this place, and setting it on the stove. I reached for the cabinet, searching for chamomile, but my fingers brushed against something else. A small jar of honey, tucked in the corner. I froze. My mother used to keep honey in the same kind of jar. I had mentioned it once, offhandedly, weeks ago. He remembered. The kettle whistled softly. I poured the tea, added a spoonful of honey, and sat at the small table by the window. The morning sun cast long shadows across the floor, painting the room in gold. I closed my eyes and breathed in the steam, willing myself to find the courage I'd been searching for since the night Vincent held me like I was something he couldn't afford to lose. I heard him before I saw him. his footsteps soft, but sure as they crossed the threshold. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. He came to stand behind me, his hand resting on the back of the chair. His breath ghosted across my shoulder. "You're quiet this morning," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "I've been thinking." He pulled out the chair beside me and sat down, folding his hands on the table. "About leaving?" I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "No." His brow furrowed slightly like he didn't quite believe me. "I've spent so long feeling like I was trapped," I whispered, but I realized I was never trapped, was I? You let me go before I ever asked to be free. His throat worked as he swallowed. "I didn't know if you'd ever come back." I reached for his hand, hesitant at first, then braver as I laced my fingers through his. "You never really let me go," I whispered. "You just waited for me to choose you." His eyes darkened, the air between us thickening. "And have you?" I leaned closer, my voice trembling. "Yes." He exhaled like I'd just set him free. He stood suddenly, pulling me to my feet, his hands cupping my face with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "Anna," he whispered, his voice cracking. I pressed my forehead to his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt. "Show me, Vincent. Show me what it looks like when you finally let yourself feel something real." He stilled for a breathless moment. And then he smiled. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It wasn't anything like the polished facade he wore for the world. It was real, soft, shaky at the edges, like he wasn't sure if he had the right to let it live on his face. But it was his. And it was mine. I let out a breathless laugh, tears pooling in my eyes as I traced my fingers along the line of his jaw, up to the corner of his mouth where that precious smile had bloomed. "I never thought I'd see it," I whispered. He caught my hand, pressing his lips to my palm. "I never thought I'd have anyone worth showing it to," he murmured. My throat tightened, but this time I didn't turn away. I reached up, cupping his face, pulling him down to me. And when our lips met, it wasn't desperate or claiming. It was soft, slow, like we had all the time in the world to get this right, because we did. We spent the rest of the day in that quiet space. No contracts, no debts, no walls. Just two people, learning what it meant to begin again. That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Vincent led me to the old bookshelf in his study. He pulled out a small leather-bound journal and handed it to me. "I started this the day we got married," he said softly. "I never thought I'd fill more than a page." I opened it carefully, my breath catching as I saw the first entry. March 3rd. She walked in like she didn't belong. I think she might be the only thing in this house that ever has. I flipped, the page, and another. Each one filled with moments I hadn't known he'd noticed. The way I touched the teapot like it was sacred. The hum of my voice when I thought I was alone. The quiet strength he saw in me when I refused to let the silence win. I looked up, tears blurring the words. "You've been watching me all this time." He nodded, his throat working. "I was too much of a coward to tell you I didn't just want to protect you. I wanted you." I closed the journal, clutching it to my chest. "And now?" He stepped closer, cupping my face again, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Now, I want to fight for you. For us. For the family I should have fought for long before tonight." I leaned into him, my heart steady for the first time in months. "I'm ready if you are," I whispered. And I knew, without a doubt, we were just getting started. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Vincent was still asleep beside me, one arm slung across my waist, his breath steady and deep. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. I hadn't felt this safe in a long time. But safety wasn't enough. Not anymore. I slipped out of bed quietly, pulling on my sweater as I padded toward the study. The journal he had given me the night before sat on the desk, its worn leather cover still slightly warm from my hands. I traced my fingers over the edge, remembering every word he had written, every moment he had silently carried while I thought I was fighting alone. But there was still something unfinished, something I couldn't ignore. I pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk and found the file I had seen him tuck away weeks ago, the one marked with the name Reed Manufacturing, the company his family had sold years before, the place where my mother had once worked. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching as I read the names listed. Dozens of employees, dozens of lives. And at the bottom, my mother's name, Mary Collins. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting the burn of tears. She had been more than a maid, more than a cook. She had been part of the fabric of that company, part of the family's legacy that had crumbled when it all fell apart. And they had let her go, like she never mattered. When Vincent finally stirred, he found me sitting at the kitchen table, the file spread out before me. He rubbed his eyes, frowning slightly as he approached. "What are you doing?" I looked up, my voice steady but soft. Finishing what she started. His brow furrowed, and I pushed the file toward him. "My mother wasn't just your housekeeper, Vincent. She worked in that factory. She was part of something bigger than both of us. And when your family walked away from all of this, they left those people behind. People like her." He let out a slow breath, sinking into the chair across from me. "I know." I blinked, startled. "You do?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent months trying to figure out what to do with this," he admitted. It felt too big, too messy. Like no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. Maybe it won't be enough. But doing nothing isn't who you are anymore. His throat worked as he swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" I took a deep breath. Rebuild it. Give the people who were left behind something to hope for again. Not just for them, but for her. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, like he was trying to decide if I was asking too much. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Okay." The following weeks passed in a blur of meetings, plans, and whispered hopes. Vincent called every former employee he could find, offering them the chance to return, this time with better wages, safer conditions, and a voice in how the company would move forward. Some accepted. Some hung up without a word. But he didn't stop trying. I stood by his side through it all, watching the walls he had spent years building finally come down. He wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't the man the world thought he was. He was something more. Something real. One evening, as we were locking up the office, Vincent paused by the doorway, staring at the old company logo hanging on the wall. I slipped my hand into his, resting my head on his shoulder. "You did it," I whispered. He let out a soft breath, squeezing my fingers. "We did it. We drove back to Maine that weekend, back to the little tailor shop where it had all begun." My father stood in the doorway as we pulled up, his face breaking into a smile I hadn't seen in years. He waved us inside, the bell above the door jingling softly as we stepped into the familiar scent of fabric and cedarwood. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said quietly, his eyes glistening. I crossed the room in 2 quick steps, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm home, Dad." He held me tighter than he had in years. "Vincent, stood by the door, watching us with something like wonder on his face. My father looked up, clearing his throat as he extended his hand. "Thank you for giving her back to me." Vincent hesitated for only a second before stepping forward and taking his hand. "I didn't give her back," he said softly. "She came back because she wanted to." My father nodded, his grip tightening. And I couldn't be prouder. That night, we sat around the tiny kitchen table, sharing tea and laughter that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Vincent reached for my hand under the table, his thumb tracing slow circles against my palm. I looked over at him, my heart swelling. We had done it. We had faced the past. We had fought for something bigger than ourselves, and we weren't finished yet. 1 year later, the tailor shop bustled with life again. The worn wooden floors had been polished. The old glass windows had been replaced, etched with delicate gold, lettering that read, "Collins and Daughter, Tailoring, since 1955. It was my father's idea, that new name. His way of passing the torch. His way of finally telling me he saw me as something more than the girl he once gave away to save this place. Stood near the window that morning, watching the small crowd gathering outside. The mayor had agreed to come for the ribbon cutting. Old customers, neighbors, and friends we hadn't seen in years filled the sidewalk, their faces lit with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Vincent stood behind me, adjusting the cuff of his suit like he wasn't used to wearing something this casual. No tie, sleeves rolled up just the way I liked. He leaned in, brushing his lips against the top of my head. "Nervous?" he whispered. I shook my head, smiling softly. "No, not anymore." He slipped his hand into mine, lacing our fingers together. Outside, the mayor cleared his throat, signaling that it was time. My father took his place by the ribbon, holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors with a grin so wide it made my throat tighten. I took a deep breath and turned to Vincent. "You should do it with me." He blinked, surprised. "This is your family's legacy, Anna. Your moment." Stepped closer, pressing my palm to his chest. "It's our legacy now. You gave this back to us. Let me share it with you." His throat worked as he swallowed hard, his eyes softening in that way they always did when I reminded him he wasn't alone anymore. We walked out together, hand in hand, standing beside my father as the mayor gave his short speech about community and small businesses and the power of second chances. I didn't hear a word of it. All I could focus on was Vincent's hand tightening around mine. When the moment came, my father handed me the scissors. I glanced up at Vincent, lifting my brows in silent invitation. He nodded, covering my hand with his fingers warm and steady. Together, we cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. I turned to him, expecting the usual polite nod, the tight-lipped acknowledgement that he had learned to give in public. But instead, he smiled. Not just for me. For everyone. Wide. Genuine. Unapologetic. The people who had whispered for months about the cold, ruthless man who had married me fell silent. I heard the shift in the air, the way their judgment cracked under the weight of what they saw now. Not a transaction, not a contract, not a debt, but love. Real, raw, unmistakable. Vincent pulled me into his arms, right there in front of everyone, and pressed his lips to my temple. "You claimed me long before I ever claimed you," he whispered. I closed my eyes, breathing him in, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath my hand. "And you," I whispered back, "have been mine. Since the moment you first broke that silence." Later that night, long after the last guest had gone, we sat on the porch of the shop, watching the sun sink behind the trees. My father had gone to bed hours ago, leaving us alone with the quiet hum of crickets and the scent of fresh wood and coffee lingering in the air. Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Tilted my head, curious. "What's that?" He handed it to me, his eyes warm. "A letter." I frowned, carefully opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in a familiar looping script. "My dearest Anna, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way home. Not to this place, but to yourself. I always knew you were stronger than you believed. Strong enough to forgive. Strong enough to love without fear. Strong enough to choose your own path, even when the world tried to choose it for you. I am so proud of you, my sweet girl. And I hope, wherever I am, I get to see you smile one more time. Love, Mom." My throat closed, tears spilling freely down my cheeks. I looked up at Vincent, clutching the letter to my chest. "Where did you find this?" I whispered. He cupped my face, brushing away my tears with his thumb. "I found it weeks ago, tucked inside an old box in your father's attic. I wanted to give it to you when you were ready." I leaned into him, sobbing softly against his shoulder. "I miss her so much," I choked out. He held me tighter, rocking me gently. "She's here, Anna," he whispered. "She's in you, in this place, in every breath you take." I pulled, back just enough to meet his gaze, my heart aching in the most beautiful way. "I love you, Vincent Reed." He smiled, wide and real, and mine. "And I love you, Anna Collins, more than I ever thought I was capable of." We stayed there until the stars blanketed the sky, until the world felt like it had finally settled into something steady, something true. And as I lay my head on his shoulder, the letter still pressed to my heart, I knew we had built something worth fighting for. Not a life built on contracts or debts, but a life built on choice, on love, on family, on home. Together. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. There are so many more journeys of love, redemption, and second chances waiting for you here. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.